Number 10, rejected at birth. Before the monologues and ruling, Loki was just a kid born into royalty. He made his first comic book appearance in Venus, issue 6, and in the Silver Age he entered with Journey into Mystery, issue 85. His father was King Laufey, leader of the giants of Jotunheim, and Loki was born not a frost giant, but rather he was pretty petite. He was small and frail, so much so that his parents were actually kind of embarrassed to call him family. He wasn't even allowed to play with the other giants. Poor Loki, from birth he's had a rough go. But it only gets worse. Number 9, his true origins. It's gotta be a tough time to find out your parents aren't even your real parents. It happens quite often in these comics, but Loki was raised in the Odinson household, and he felt like he belonged there at least. Well, mostly. I mean, sure, Thor was the favorite brother and all, but he truly thought Odin and Frigga were his parents. So when Loki came into contact with the Casket of Ancient Winters, he actually thought he was cursed. Now, the Casket of Ancient Winters was safely stored in Odin's vault at this time, and we see it for the first time in the comics in Thor issue 346. And it made it to the big screen in 2011 in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So the Casket of Ancient Winters is a relic that doubled down as a deadly weapon, belonging originally to the Frost Giants. So Loki felt this without even knowing his true heritage, and he still felt this power, and it has the ability to unleash the fury of 1,000 killing winters. So you open this thing and it's trouble. You better be ready for quite a rush. It took all of Heimdall's strength to just break through this ice when Loki used it against him later on in Thor 1. Coming from a guy who lives in Canada, it doesn't look too bad. Wear some layers, grab a coffee, you'll be fine. And before we continue on with this Loki list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, it looks just like that, maybe a little less nice. That would be great for our studio. It really does help us out quite a bit, especially while we're working from home for this last little chunk. It really does go a long way for us. So thank you so much for your patience and support. Let's get right back into this video. Number 8, stuck in a tree. Now I know that doesn't sound very frightening off the bat, but when it comes to Asgardian magic, this can be quite daunting. In Journey into Mystery issue 85, the first time we see Loki on the pages, before he even gets up to anything crazy in the comics, he was condemned by the gods to be trapped in a tree. In a tree! He's to remain there until somebody sheds a tear for him. Now, Loki, obviously, no one's gonna be crying over him. He was kind of the worst, but someone did cry. Someone did shed one tear for Loki. Might be a little bit different than you think. So he's been in this tree for ages now, but slowly and surely he's able to control the tree. And I don't mean like the trees from Wizard of Oz either, like not gonna huck apples at Odin. He can just manipulate the tree in small ways. So when Heimdall's passing that tree, he commands the tree to shed a leaf, and the timing was so perfect. The leaf just fell and then poked him right in his eye, causing, of course, a tear to fall after. And voila, we see Loki emerge from this tree and just run for it, just run for the hills. And his first plan of attack was to seek revenge on the one responsible for his tree time, Brother Thor.
Number 7, Slide. This guy was a chemical engineer who created a chemical coating that eliminated all friction between that object and surfaces. He's like the opposite of Trapster. He invented the ultimate lubricant. Then this evil tycoon buys up the company that he works for and shuts down the lab. Slide, aka Jerome Beecher, was going to build his own company founded on the non-stick solution he invented, but no bank was willing to give him a loan. So he did what anybody would do and decides to rob the bank. He makes himself a costume out of this material and, free from the clutches of friction, is able to zip around skating on the ground up to 30 miles per hour and can't be stopped, not by people's grabbing hands or even Spider-Man's sticky webbing. Now, this isn't exactly the most lame villain, but the idea of this slippery criminal sliding all over the place just doesn't really do it for me. Where's the stakes? Spidey could just wait for this guy to slip and fall off of a cliff or into oncoming traffic, or they could just have him slip and slide right into a jail cell. I'll say one thing, the way that he zips all over the place in the comic panels looks like a lot of fun.
Number 6, solitary confinement. So after the events of the original Avengers movie, when Loki didn't steal the cosmic cube and break the timeline, he was actually sent back up to Asgard to do some time. Now, in usual fashion, he attended a hearing where he was sentenced to life in the Asgardian dungeons. Now, the only reason he was still alive in the first place is actually because of his mother, his adopted mother, Frigga. The trial was nuts. Loki got absolutely blasted. He was roasted. He was told his birthright was to die as a child, cast out on a frozen rock. So when he got cozy in confinement, his mother came in to say some last words to the fallen son. She was calm, she shared concern about his holding cell. It was a beautiful moment where you could tell Loki wasn't so evil after all. He wasn't manipulated from the cosmic cube anymore. He cared for his mother through all of this, and when he went out to touch her hand one last time, it ended up just being magic. She wasn't actually there. Now, funny enough, in a deleted scene, this moment is even more heartbreaking. The scene showed the two talking as they did in the final cut of Thor: The Dark World, but Frigga told Loki that a true king admits his faults. And then Loki responds with, well, Odin's not my real father, so you're not my real mother.
Number 5. Witnessed. Daniel West, as the Reverse Flash, dreamt of repairing his relationship with his sister Iris, and blamed his father for everything awful that had ever happened to him, believing the best way to actually fix his relationship with Iris would be to go back in time and kill his father to prevent his younger self from ever getting angry enough to push his dad down the stairs, and to prevent, any of the mistreatment that would happen to him thereafter. Daniel ended up with powers that allowed him to drain the Speed Force energy out of others touched by it in order to turn back time. Using this ability, he managed to get enough of a charge to go back and attempt to change his own past. But his younger self and Iris arrived home just in time to witness the attempted murder of their father by Reverse Flash, and this only, of course, ended up creating more trauma for Iris and created a larger rift between them. In fact, a rift that would probably never be repaired.
Number 4. Eaten by his father. Yeah, this one's, oof. In War of the Realms, the Dark Elf Malekith returns from imprisonment, starts a war in his homeworld of Svartalheim, and was crowned a king. The next step was to assemble the League of Allies from across the 10 realms, forming the Dark Council. Now among those was King Laufey and Loki. Now a family discussion breaks out. Laufey confesses to Loki that he's the worst thing to ever come from his loins. Nice use of the word loins there, good stuff. And he referred to him as his one great shame. As if the roast wasn't hard enough, he proceeds to eat Loki with a very loud crunch to go along with the visuals. Yum.
And coming in number 3, we have Spidercide, like genocide but performed by a spider. Yeah, that is not the best writing I've ever heard of in my life. Spidercide was birthed out of the Clone Saga, which is considered one of the worst sagas in comic history. So any villain to come out of it is probably never going to see the light of day again unless they're used as a joke. Spidercide is a clone of Spider-Man that has the ability to regenerate from what seems to be any accident. He was convinced at first that he was the real Peter Parker, but then he found out that he was just a freak. Such is the plight of most clones. When you read his character on paper, it sounds super cool. He has the powers of Spider-Man with some of the most deadly features of the Terminator, but the character was used in such a horrible fashion that it became a laughingstock before it ever got its time to shine. Maybe in the future we'll see someone use this character to its full ability.
Number 2. Killed by Thanos. Yeah, we gotta mention this one. I'd say it's a pretty bad day. The final scenes of Thor Ragnarok, we find Thor and Loki aboard the new ship, the new Asgard, after the old one got blown to smithereens. Loki looks at Thor and tells him how much he reminds him of Odin. It's a very sweet moment between the brothers. Finally, they're close and they're ready to do some good. Then all of a sudden, this big ship approaches and audience knew who it was right off the bat. Loki met his fate before the title card even appeared in Avengers Infinity War. He tried to go out like a hero and he put his tricks to use, but Thanos saw it coming. And the crack we hear in Loki's neck is... I still hear it in my head. No resurrections this time, Thanos says, before dropping his lifeless blue body on the floor of the ship. Right before Loki gets the chokey, he does say something to Thor that stuck with him and fans. He assures them that the sun will shine on them again. So I'm hoping that Loki comes out of this alive somehow. I think the Disney show is gonna bring him back in a way like they did with Vision. It's possible. And finally, number 1, TVA trouble. Loki is quick on his feet. Even when he was in the midst of being detained after Avengers 1, he still got his hands on the Tesseract for 2 seconds in Endgame, and poof, now he was gone, disrupting all these timelines. Now this probably felt good in the moment. He's like, yes, the Cosmic Cube, here we go, time to make a getaway. But luckily for us, the Time Variance Authority was waiting for him. He gets arrested by them, his clothes get ripped off, he is now a prisoner of the TVA. Now the TVA is the Time Variance Authority. It's an organization that protects timelines, and Owen Wilson is his character named Agent Mobius, and he explains to Loki that they need him to restore the timelines. Now this is going to be a fun series. I've actually been looking forward to this, I think the most since all of these shows were announced. Right beside WandaVision, I'm like, it's going to be good. The fact that this is 2012 Loki again is just the icing on the timeline cake. I'm excited to see more of this character arc on screen because we missed like 4 years from when he became a king at the end of Thor 2, and then we cut to Thor Ragnarok and it was like a comedy buddy cop movie. Like I want to see that dark stuff in between. I want to see that dark Loki still. I want to see more monologues, more Mewling Quim comments, that kind of stuff. Now he's gonna be DB Cooper? Let's go, sign me out.
Number 10, costume destroyed. I mean, this is definitely something Reverse Flash recovered from as it happened during his first appearance, but still, it sucks to have your costume destroyed, especially one as powerful as Thawne's was initially. During his first appearance, it's Barry's old costume, which Thawne randomly finds, that gives him his super speed. Wearing it makes him speedy. So in the end, when he crosses paths with Barry Allen's The Flash, Allen is certain to take the costume from Professor Zoom after defeating him. He not only takes it, but is also sure to burn it up so he can never use it again. Of course, for Professor Zoom, as frustrating as this may have been at the time, it would only be a minor setback for the villain. Number 9. Love Denied. In a weird turn of events, Eobard Thawne appears to Iris West and claims he is in love with her. Of course, we can't really trust that this is true. It could have just been a ploy to mess with Barry had she agreed to be with Thawne. But either way, Iris refuses Thawne's advances. Iris would rather die than be with him, which is exactly what Thawne had in mind. Suffering either from a bruised ego or simply looking to find a new way to mess with Barry after Iris refused to go with him, Thawne killed her by phasing his hand through her brain, but making it solid momentarily when it was still in there. Ick. Although having your heart broken is never nice, this is no way to react to someone declining your advances, Thawne. Number 8. Tricked into returning home. Following Crisis on Infinite Earths, Eobard Thawne shows up in that current continuity and attempts to impersonate Barry Allen. After a mental break and in a state of disillusion, Thawne actually believes in fact that he is Barry Allen. Barry at this time was gone, believed dead after the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths, and as a result, Wally West clues into the fact that this isn't Barry Allen, but an imposter. Wally then tricks Thawne into returning to the 25th century. Upon his return, Thawne also seems to have lost his memory of this event and only has an unexplainable hatred for Barry Allen and the remains of his own old costume as clues as to what exactly happened to him. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, just a quick reminder, if you love lists about the Flash as much as I love giving them to you, please be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up.
Number 7. Hulk smashed. When Loki tried to tame the Hulk in the first Avengers movie, he got ragdoll into cement in the Avengers Tower. It was kind of a funny moment for theaters, especially that little squeak that Tom Hiddleston lets out when he's lying there. It's so funny, it's great. Well, according to E. Paul Zare, who has a PhD in neuroscience, and Dr. Kirk McGee from the QEII Health Sciences Center, Loki would have been kind of screwed. He would have been in a lot of pain here. Due to the whip-like actions of the Hulk swinging him, Loki would apparently have a crushed skull, fractured vertebrae from the cervical or neck region all the way down to the lower back, broken ribs, dislocated hips, crushed tibia and fibula, and crushed metatarsal ankle bones. Loki would also suffer internal damage as well, like punctured lungs, a ruptured septum in the heart, a lacerated liver, ruptured spleen, kidney damage, and a ruptured bladder. Now, I get that he's part of the whole God Squad, but he's got to feel at least a few of these. And we have proof that he did feel those, because in Thor Ragnarok, when Thor gets ragdolled in a similar fashion, Loki gets up excitedly and says, "That's how it feels." So you can tell he's been thinking about this a bit.
Number 6. His mother's death. There is another character who is also known as Reverse Flash named Daniel West, who first appeared during the New 52 in the 2012 run of The Flash in issue number 0. Daniel West's story is possibly more tragic than Professor Eobard Thawne's, in some spots at least. In Daniel's origin story, his mother died in childbirth and his father forever blamed him for this, seeing it as his child's fault. While his father treated him badly as a child because of this and turned to drink, his sister Iris tried to protect him from their father's anger. However, Daniel's mistreatment created a sense of frustration and anger within him too that one day boiled over, causing him to push his father down the stairs in retaliation. This set Daniel down a darker path and also ruined his relationship with his sister.
Coming in number 5, we have typeface. You know what everyone loves? Signage! So why don't you make your persona based off that? I'm sure that will pull in a ton of people and you'll become one of the most famous supervillains of all time. No way, man, signage is super lame. Well, typeface, also known as Gordon Thomas, didn't think so, and he had a pretty good foundation. He was a Vietnam War vet who was skilled in hand-to-hand combat, military tactics, and all sorts of weapons. He even beat Spider-Man in their first encounter. If this guy changed his theme to anything other than signage, he probably would have been pretty cool. But the reason that he did this was because when Thomas came back from war, his life fell apart and he ended up getting a job at a sign shop, and it was the only time in his life where he ever felt happy. When the place was bought out, he lost his job, and this was his inspiration to become a villain. Luckily, he eventually switched sides and becomes a hero. If you're gonna get an F on your character, you might as well be on the side of good.
Number 4. Killed by Batman. And let's go back to Thawne now for a bit. During the events of Flashpoint, Professor Zoom ends up murdered by Batman. true story. He had carefully guarded himself against Barry by becoming a living paradox, pretty smart. In issue number 5 of Flashpoint from 2011, he brags to Barry about this very fact after revealing that it was the Flash and not him that messed up the timeline, thereby creating the Flashpoint timeline. However, what he wasn't expecting and didn't count for was that Batman would be around to find a loophole. Even in the Flashpoint reality, Batman is the master of exploiting people's weaknesses. And Thomas Wayne's Batman does so this time around by catching Thawne unawares. Rising up after taking a beating from the villain, Batman runs him through with a sword, killing Thawne. Well, at least the Thawne of that continuity. Of course, Thawne, I feel like, is never gone. He would be back.
Number 3, beaten to death. In the 2004 Loki series, it picks up with Loki claiming leadership of Asgard. It's a dream come true this time around. He has the throne officially, but the throne life isn't what he expected, really. Those who helped Loki become a king now want him to continue and fulfill his promises. So Loki would now go to his prisoners, Thor and Lady Sif, for some ruling advice, one of those. It's like when somebody becomes manager and they don't know how to manage, so they're like, how do I do this? And you're like, I'm making $12, man. I don't know. You gotta figure this one out. After some events, it's decided that Thor will be beheaded the next day at dawn. But in typical Loki fashion, he went against fate and opted not to follow through last minute. He spared his brother and freed him, but Hela was actually revealed to be another version of Loki, just used as an illusion to get Thor killed. So when Thor was free, he was like, you know what, I'm just gonna finish this myself. And he beat Loki to death. It was brutal.
Number 2, discovering the truth. One of the worst things to happen to Eobard, and something that would cement his role as Barry's worst and of course best villain, was when he went back in time to meet Barry and visited the Flash Museum. Eobard Thawne, you see, idolized Barry and looked up to the Flash as a hero because he wanted to be just like him. Unfortunately, due to a predestination paradox, he would learn upon traveling back in time to meet his hero that he, Eobard Thawne, Professor Zoom, would later become Alan's greatest villain. This shocking revelation would drive him insane and ironically turn him into the villain that he would become. Number 1, learning the truth of his ancestry. One of the most shocking revelations in comics has to be when we all learned, Thawne included, of his connection to the Allens and how he was actually related to them. What? So all this time, he had only been causing pain to his own family, at least his family by blood. Eobard Thawne, it turns out, was the descendant of Malcolm Thawne, who was actually the twin brother of Barry Allen. The twins were separated at birth, with Malcolm being raised by adoptive parents who believed they were actually his biological parents, and Barry being raised by their birth parents, the Allens. When Thawne learns of this, it only adds to his frustration and anger, as it makes him once more face the facts that he was destined to become Barry's true nemesis, and that he can never escape this fate or escape Barry Allen.
Coming in at number 10, we have Frogman. I mean, if you don't have any powers, you don't have to commit to a super lame animal. Frogman is Eugene Patilio. There was a time when he took his frog suit and he tried to take on some of the hardest hitting street level Marvel heroes. More than once did he come face to face with Spidey, and every time he was taken into the dirt almost immediately. And it's not hard to figure out why. The guy built a suit where the only power was how high he could jump. Like, if you're going to get your powers from some sort of accident or you're born with them, then you don't have a choice. You have to stick with whatever your weird power is. That's your life. But if you're building a power, then you can be whoever you want. Why would you choose frogs? There are so many other creatures you could go with. Like the Falcon. Even though he's not the coolest hero of all time, he's a million times cooler than the dude who hops around and tries to cause some havoc. On the bright side, Eugene's son eventually takes on the mantle of the frog suit and tries to be a hero, but on the downside, Eugene's son sucks at being a hero as much as his dad sucks at being a villain. So in the end, the family was doomed to be on the sidelines. I would like to see one of those what if comics where Frogman becomes the greatest hero of all time.
Hey guys, if you like these videos and you want to see some more, make sure you hit that like button. Number 9, the Trapster. His name is Peter Petruski, and I can't believe how long he's been around. Marvel has him come back again and again, despite the fact that he's got no powers other than this weird paste gun. He invented a super adhesive liquid paste, and loves using it for evil. He's redesigned his costume multiple times, always ridiculous and far too proud of himself, but he has definitely been around. He appears in multiple stories and has gone up against the likes of Daredevil, Fantastic Four, and of course Spider-Man. All with just a goo gun. He is hired by Red Skull at one point and even has a run-in with Ghost Rider. His paste was once confused for Spider-Man's webbing, and Trapster was furious to see Spidey getting credit in the newspaper for his crimes. Trapster is undeniably lame, but he's obviously got some fans because he's been around so long, so we'll leave him here at number 9. Lame, but not the worst.
And coming in at number 8, we have STEGRON, the Dinosaur Man. Once again, if you get to pick your powers, maybe you should shoot a little higher than being a species that already went extinct. They already lost the battle with nature. You think they will be able to take down superheroes? STEGRON was originally Dr. Vincent Stegron. He was a scientist who took a liking to the serum which turned Kirk Connors into the Lizard Man, and he decided he would up the ante a little bit. He mixed the formula with dinosaur DNA and then shot it all up inside his body and turned into a dinosaur-human hybrid. He then went on to try and make an army of dinosaurs to try and take over the world, but was taken down by a force he didn't expect. It was winter. Dinosaurs are cold-blooded apparently, so when winter came around, they all went to sleep, including STEGRON. If you're picking your superpower, you should go with something that can handle temperatures below 10 degrees Celsius. Unless you're in Florida or something. If you're down there, you can build the biggest dinosaur army you want, and the state would probably be fine with it.
Number 7. Becoming the Flash's #1 fan. I don't know if you believe in destiny, but if you do, then this bit of history from Eobard's past is likely one of the worst things to have happened to the character. Thawne grew up in a future and is initially from the 25th century. During his time growing up there, he became obsessed with the Flash, kinda idolized him, and wanted to be just like his hero. Sounds nice, right? But Eobard Thawne's admiration for Barry Allen would set him down a dark path that he'd never be able to turn back from, even if he tried. In becoming a Flash fan, Thawne had confirmed his own irreversible dark destiny.
Number 6, the Walrus. With big wet flippers and menacing tusks and the blood-curdling cries of "Arf, arf," it's easy to see how terrifying a walrus-based supervillain could be. This guy is not. Hubert Carpenter was created when his uncle, a janitor, tried again and again to give Hubert powers. They exhausted the names of animals he could have the proportionate strength of all the way through the alphabet till they got to the letter W. He was totally stumped and then became inspired by a poster of the Beatles and becomes the Walrus. He goes on a classic spree of mass destruction, eventually seeing Beast lecturing at a university and decides to attack him to prove that he's the greatest product of modern science. Hilariously enough, it's actually Frogman who gets the credit for taking him down later, and this really gets the blubber boiling. Spider-Man can't help laughing when he meets this guy and winds up taking him down for the second time with just a tap of his finger.
Number 5. Cursed Advice. Algrim the Strong was a lieutenant of the Dark Elves leader Malekith, and he was serving his master Malekith, you know, the MCU's best villain, Malekith, him. Algrim was locked up with Loki at the same time in those dungeons. He actually sacrificed his life to become the last of the cursed. Much like Loki in Avengers 1, he too got locked up with bigger intentions. So once he transformed using the Curse Stone and he punched his way out of the dungeons, he debated setting Loki free, but again, he was frail and small, so he's like, no. Walking away, Loki tipped him off to the best escape route to the Asgardian shield generator, and after Curse demolishes that, the other Dark Elves were able to invade Asgard, and then Curse met up with Malekith, and after failing to retrieve the Aether, Curse stabbed Frigga in the back with her own sword. To think Loki helped this guy out, that's crazy. He's like, hey, try those stairs, you get there faster. And then now his mom's dead. Way to go, Loki. This was after he chose not to free Loki as well, so Loki just gave the advice just cuz.
Number 4, the Spot. This guy is something else. Some people think his powers are pretty cool and others hate him, but he definitely belongs on this list. Spider-Man himself bursts into tears laughing upon meeting this guy, and looking like a Dalmatian, it's pretty easy to see why. He's all white, covered in black spots that function as two-way portals. That's pretty much his main thing. He takes the spots and he chucks them around and uses them like portals like this is Looney Tunes, messing around with Spider-Man and even making him punch himself in the face. If this guy doesn't sound lame enough already, the more portals that he throws around, the less spots that he has on his body, making himself more vulnerable. He got these powers after being exposed to the spotted dimension, and the spots can even be suspended in mid-air. It's honestly a pretty cool concept, but the villain himself is just too lame to make it work for me.
Number 3, his mother's death. On Prime Earth, Eobard Thawne's origins are a little bit different. Instead of growing up idolizing the Flash, Thawne became a villain as a result of a few traumatic events in his past. One such meaningful event in his life that mirrors one that he is often responsible for making happen in Barry's life in the comics was the death of his mother. Thawne's mother was actually killed by his father, and even worse, a younger Eobard happened to witness this happen. Obviously, him destroying Barry Allen's family life was a way of him making things feel more fair, and also trying to corrupt Allen by traumatizing him as he himself had been corrupted and traumatized. Thawne is also known for his belief in balance within the Speed Force, so this could also be his own twisted attempt at evening the scales.
Number 2. Plant Man. In Strange Tales number 113 from 1963, we meet the mysterious Plant Man. This gardener turned professional criminal was born in London and orphaned at a young age. When he left the orphanage, he became lab assistant to a well-known botanist who was studying the low-level mental activity of plant life. Unfortunately, this guy fired him for focusing too much on this invention he was making and not gardening for him. One day, lightning strikes his plant ray gun that he's been working on, and it becomes imbued with the power to control and animate plant life. Ooh. So he then makes a disguise and sets out to get his revenge for being fired by framing his boss for robbery. The plant life isn't the only thing with low-level mental activity, as this guy made from leaves somehow thinks that he can take on the Human Torch. He is later quickly defeated and his ray gun is destroyed, although I'm sad to say he does appear again in 2002.
And coming at the number 1 spot, we have Big Wheel. This villain's theme is a massive wheel that he rides around and it has guns on it. Reading some of these is like watching a breakdown of a group of YouTubers trying to find out what they need to do so they can set their channel apart from everyone else. Like, maybe if I was the wheel guy, then people would like my content. Well, Big Wheel's just an ordinary guy until the Tinkerer gave him something that was probably a prank, a massive wheel that could ride around and had guns on it. You think something like that would be extremely hard to control, and you would be right. Big Wheel would die when he lost control of his massive wheel car thing and fell into a river and drowned. Here's a lesson for any future villain. If you want to pick a gimmick that is going to set you apart from the rest, before you make a hard decision and invest in a giant wheel that will get you killed and make you look like a fool, you should probably hire a think tank to come up with a better idea. Like I said earlier on in this list, you can pick whatever power you want when you're building it from scratch, so why go with wheels?